because I wanted to meet more people that are doing data analytics. Because I do freelance at the moment. Because I'm
Okay.
doing freelance at the moment, so I don't always get to meet people who are also doing data analytics. And I feel if we network with each other, this is where we can share ideas. So that's the whole reason why I set up this group of data analytics. So in today's session, I'm going to show you about, how to get the story from the data. I will share my screen now with you.
Okay, please. And also, excuse me, if you don't mind sharing the link also to my email so I can like join on my laptop.
Ah, okay. Oh, you
Yeah.
didn't see the email. Okay.
No, I didn't get the email.
Okay. So when you say the link, you mean the link for YouTube?
Okay. Oh yeah, since you're streaming, yeah.
Because I can share the spreadsheet with you at the end,
Okay. Yeah, that's all right then.
at the end of the session. Okay. So the way I plan to do it is how to understand the story behind the data. I will give a little presentation like this, so it's all written out, and then later we'll go into the spreadsheet.
Okay.
Okay, so how to understand the data. Okay, so the purpose of this is to understand the story behind the data, because I think we're all working with data and we want to understand how can we actually, how can we get the story behind it? Like, what is the data actually telling us? Okay, so
Yeah.
in order to do that, we first have to do the basic things like cleansing the data, preparing it. So that's why I place that in there. And then it's how do you understand what the data is saying, once you cleanse it. And then how do you present the data? And then at the very end, I'll just give, at the very end of this presentation, I have like general tips on data presentation. But the main focus is like, how do you go about getting the narrative? Okay, so cleansing and preparing the data. Please feel free, if you have any questions, you can ask me, just interrupt and just, you can ask.
All right.
Cleansing and preparing the data. So the whole purpose of why we cleanse and prepare the data is to ensure that the data is usable and it's relevant. In my early days, I used to find data cleansing very boring. So I wouldn't spend much time. And as a result, I would get a bad result, I would get wrong results. And I end up having to go back again from the very beginning and cleanse. So basically, never ever skip the step of cleansing and preparing. Always look at the data at the very beginning. And then we'll go through later, like, what does that mean? Okay, so when you've got the data, so the first thing is data collection, is understanding what data do you need. And then once you've got it, is just having a high level view, a high level understanding of what the data is. And I'll explain soon what that actually means, the high level view. And then you check for data quality. So data quality is things like, is there anything missing in the values? Is there any like missing values in there or any inconsistencies? Are there any outliers? For example, like maybe you might see you have a data of people's ages. And for some reason, you have an age that's 104.
Okay.
Whereas most of the ages tend to be in the 30s and 40s. Then there's something wrong there. Do you have duplicates? Duplicates is a thing that you need to check for because you don't want to be counting data twice because that will give you the wrong result. Okay, so once you've checked for the data, once you've checked the data quality that you have, you can now clean the data. So cleaning is based on what you've seen. So for example, if you find that there's lots of missing values, it might be go and investigate and find them, fill up these missing values, or it might be, you've got the outliers, get rid of the outliers, things like that. So you know what the data cleansing will be based on your checks that you did when you did the data quality. And then then you need to transform the data. So transforming is basically having the data ready for analysis now. So it could be, if we go back to the example of you have data with people's ages, you have age, 3, 4, 5, 6, all the way up to 120. But you don't need that level of detail. You might actually want to group the age bands. So you might want to see, for example, age 10 to 20. So transforming the data could be creating categories so the data is not too detailed. Or it might be aggregating information or maybe standardizing. So you might find like in the date column, you have different types of dates. So, maybe one date is a short date, like it might say 3rd of April 2000, whatever. Another one might be completely a long date where it'll say Thursday, the 3rd of January 2004. you know, that could be written too long. So you want to standardize it, make sure that it's all uniform and the same.
Okay.
So I will show you the spreadsheet here. Can you see my spreadsheet?
Yeah, I can. No,
Okay.
it's still the PowerPoint slides.
Oh, it's still on the PowerPoint, is that? Okay. Let's stop the share and share it. I need to share my entire screen. Okay, can you see the spreadsheet now?
Yeah, I can see it now. Thank you.
Okay, so for example, if I was given data like this, I wouldn't just go and straight and analyze it. So when I mentioned high level, the high level would be like, look at every single column. So what is the column name? This says athletes, and then I'll click on, I always put my filters on. I'll click on the athletes and I'll just look through the data. And then, I can see that, okay, everything in here is text. So that data looks clean, and I can see that there's a first name and surname and it's consistent. So that's good. And then even for blanks, I would actually be curious, what is how many blanks do you have? I would detick it and I'll select the blanks so I can see. And I can see there isn't that many blanks. So like, okay, that's good. You don't have that many blanks. So and then I'll do the same thing again. I'll look at age. I'll go for the age and I see that, okay, it starts from age 15 and I go down to age 61. So it gives me straight away the age range. And I think to myself, okay, that looks sensible, age 15 to 61. Okay, maybe the age 61, I'll think, could that be correct? But the rest looks sensible because these are athletes. And then the same thing again, I'll look at how many blanks there are. And I'll go for year. And I'm basically looking, are these all numbers or is there like any text written in there? And then I'll see the range, like what is the smallest? So we see that the earliest year is 2000, the latest year is 2012, and there are no blanks. And I'll continue that for every single one. So I look at the column name, I look at what's inside it, is there any blanks? Does it look correct? And then
Yeah.
I'll also look at the overall data in terms of, okay, what is it actually telling me? So I'll read it as if I'm reading a book. So I'll say, look, so for example, I'll say athlete, Michael Phelps is an athlete. He's aged 23 years old. He played in the year 2008. The closing ceremony date was the 24th. Can you tell how I'm reading it? The sports, swimming. He's got 8 gold medals. The silver medals is 0, bronze 0. So I would read each line. And the reason why I'm doing that, I'll do that 2 or 3 times. The reason why I do that is to understand what is the data actually telling me and how is it being grouped at the moment. Because by not doing that, by not understanding what each line represents, you could easily summarize the data wrongly when you're doing your pivot tables. So that's how I go about understanding the data. So I would also probably count. If it was sales information, I would look at the totals. I'd even look at the totals for this. I'd look at the totals and see 3,000. The number of gold medals, 3,143. So I'd record that somewhere. I'd record the silver, I'd record the bronze, especially before I start deleting stuff. So you might find that you need to delete stuff when you see some mistakes. And the reason why I do that is just to get an idea of, okay, this is where the data where I started from, and this is where it's at the end. Okay, so that's what I mean when I say that the data preparation. The data preparation makes sure that the data is correct and it helps me to understand the data, like just a high level view. Any questions before I move on?
No questions.
Okay, so that's the cleansing and the preparing. And then the purpose of data as a story. I just wanted to stress this part out. Why do we bother talk about story? So the reason why we talk about presenting the data as a story is because it enhances engagement from the audience. Some people, like when they present with data, they think it's boring straight away. But when you tell it as a story, they'll find it a bit more interesting and they're able to follow it more. So that's the reason why we like to present it as a story, as a narrative, as a beginning and an end. And also when you present it as a story, it helps you to simplify complex data or complex issues. And you can now present it to a wider audience. Yeah, that's why, for example, you're able to present data now to somebody who's like a non-technical audience, because you said it like a story. And also when you present it as a data, it makes it easier to understand information. And when you can understand the information that's coming, it then helps you to make decisions from the data. So that's the whole purpose of why we present it as a data, as a story. So before we go into what is the data narrative, which is the key point,
Okay.
I would say that it's very, very important to know what question do you want to get answered, or what questions do you want to get answered. So I look at it as like you're having a conversation with the data, like, okay, what do you want to find out from it? What do you want it to reveal? Okay, so because it's very difficult just to have data and go straight into it, produce a report. You wouldn't know where to start, you'd get lost. But if you have like a question behind like what you want to achieve, then that makes it easier. So some people say that what is the objective? I just say that, what is the question that you want answered from the data? And if you know the business goals, that would also help you as well with the questions. Okay, so before you get into what is the data narrative, you first need to know what question you want answered from the data. Then you must cleanse the data, as we spoke before. And then you also must understand your audience. So understanding your audience, I'm sure you've heard this part before, understanding your audience is important because that will determine how detailed you go. And that will kind of determine what type of visuals you're going to use on your data report. So for example, for a technical audience, you use a lot more numbers. Whereas for someone who's non-technical, you probably would use more words or more images. Okay, so in our analysis, you're going to see that it's broken down into 3 main points in terms of like the narrative. So the way I look at it is patterns and trends. Like, what is the pattern? What patterns can we see from the data? And then what is the anomaly? This anomaly is not the same as what we saw in terms of data cleansing. This anomaly is more of, okay, I see a pattern here, but has it deviated from the pattern? If so, why is it deviated? Yeah, so that's what I mean here when I say anomalies.
Okay.
And then the comparison. Comparison is good because it enables us to kind of to get an idea if something is performing well or not when we compare it against another category. So it enables us to highlight key points. And when you structure your data, when you do your data story, you need to have a beginning, a middle, and an end. So the beginning is basically, where you introduce the context and the main question. The middle is the analysis. And at the end, because sometimes people forget to actually have an end when they do their report, is that you need to conclude it with some insights or recommendation. So at the very, very end, the audience needs to feel like they know something, they've gained some insight, or they're going to do something about it. So I'm going to give you a case study, and this is a sales performance analysis. So the context is basically a retail company wants to understand its sales performance over the past year. Yeah. So that's what it is. That's the purpose now. What we're going to do our report is what is the sales performance? We want to understand it over the past year. So data collection is, okay, what do we need? That means we would then need the monthly sales data from the different stores.
Okay.
So we're going to go through that, but just to let you know, the remainder slides, 9 and 10, just general tips in terms of when to know which graph to use and general tips of how to keep it this, but how to keep what things to look out for when you're doing your graph. Bring up can you see my spreadsheet?
Yeah, I can see the spreadsheet.
Brilliant. So this is the monthly sales data for different store locations. Okay, so this is our data. So I've used this data. I know data sets normally are much, much more than this, but I've used this to kind of illustrate our point. So then you can then use that for much bigger data. Okay, so this is our data. So like I said, the very first thing is you need to look at it, like, what is it? So this is the monthly sales data for different stores. So we have our month, January, February, March, 999. Then we have urban store 1, and then we have the sales amounts for each month. Then we have urban store 2. We have the sales amount again going down. And then we have rural store 1, rural store 2. So we can see this company has 4 different stores. And this is how it's been labeled, and we have it per month. Okay. So just to remind you, our guide for finding the narrative is first, understand what the objective is, what's the context, and then you collect the data, and then the analysis would be, okay, what is the trend? So the trend here is like, let's look at what the seasonal highs and lows are in the sales. Are there any trends? Let's look at comparisons. Let's look at any anomalies. and then we'll write the narrative, and then we're going to do a visual, and then we'll write down our insights at the very end.
Okay.
So when you see whenever I do any report, you always see like I will have a spreadsheet here where I have all the working outs on this side. And then at the very end, then I pick and choose which graphs I want and I put it in the other sheet. And then it's much more neater. So you can look at this is like our working sheet that we're working on, that we're doing analysis. And I always like to have at the very, very beginning, at the very top, what are we doing as a reminder? Like, what's the purpose so that I don't get lost in the data analysis? Okay, so the context is every retail company wants to understand its sales performance over the past year. So that's the question we're asking is, what was the sales performance over the past year? Okay, so here I've produced a graph which identifies seasonal highs and lows. So as you can see, you've got the month from January to December, and you can see what the highs and lows were for each individual store. So I decided to stack it because I wanted to see what the overall one was to see if there's a trend kind of thing. So you can see it's kind of wavy.
Yeah.
And then I did it, then you can see it kind of individually for each individual store. And it looks like it's following the same pattern. So what I've got down here is, can you spot any trend in the chart? Do you think it remains, this kind of questions I've asked. So can you spot any trend? So I would say probably it is seasonal because it goes up and then down and up and then down and up. And does it remain constant or increase over time? So no, I say no, it's seasonal, it goes up, down, up, down. And then the question would be, what is the trough and what is the peak? So if you look at the data, which month would you say is the lowest?
April, May actually.
Yes, exactly, April and May. And that looks like it's the same for all of them each month. We can't see it too well, but we have a rough idea. It looks like it's April and May, it's low. And then which one would you say is the highest? Which months?
December.
Yes, exactly, in December.
Yeah.
Exactly. So from this, we can say straight away that it is seasonal. And it looks like it's lower in April and May, and then it goes up in November and December. Just waiting for the graph to load. Here you've got a line graph. Line graphs are very good when you want to see like trends over time. So you notice that now we can see the trend properly. We can see that for each individual. Yeah, and we can see that it follows the same pattern. You notice they all kind of go up at the same time, down at the same time. So
I was just thinking, if we also throw in the quarter into this graph, it is also going to show that the second and the third quarters and the fourth quarter. Okay, the second quarters and the last quarter. I don't know. I'm just thinking, if we throw in quarters into it, it's going to also break down the year into 4 different parts, and then we can see,
it will be more apparent. Yes.
Yeah.
Exactly. It will be more obvious. Yes, that's true. And have you noticed the stores? They seem to follow the same pattern. You see, like really big store one, it goes up and goes down, it goes up, it goes down. And an urban store two does the exact same thing, goes up and down, same rhythm. And the same thing for rural. So which confirms again that it's seasonal. So the kind of questions, are there differences in store performances? Do all stores follow the same pattern? So the difference that we can see, which stores are the highest?
The urban and the urban stores are the urban stores, both the rural and the.
Exactly. So you see, we're getting a narrative there. So you see that the urban seems to have higher sales than the rural ones. So that's what I've written down. Sales peaks are also higher in the urban stores compared to rural. So you might be able to see that in the graph. I don't know if you can see. Can you see from October to November how high it goes up?
Yeah,
it's quite steep, and it's not as steep. To get that into numbers, I've done percentages so you can compare from the previous month. So, for example, in urban store one, you've got 4%. So basically, what that means is that sales increased by 4% compared to the previous month. And then in March, sales increased by 6%. And then in April, it went down by 13%. So I've created a table here which enables you to see the pattern each time. So then you see in November, it increased for store 1, 28% increase in store 2, whereas a bit lower in rural 1 and rural 2. So it still increases, but not at a higher amount, not as high as it does for the urban stores. Okay, so that's like another thing that will add to the narrative. And then I've got here anomalies. So sometimes I like to use scatter plots to plot graph, to plot information and to see any patterns. In this particular example, because we don't have that many data points, we can't actually see anything. It's not really telling us anything new compared to the, what was in the previous graphs. So what I've done here in this graph here, I've copied the data again. And what I've done percentages, like what proportion of sales. So for example, in January, what proportion of sales in January for urban store 1 makes up the total urban store? What proportion of sales in February for store 1 makes up the total? So for example, what this means for urban store 1, 8% of sales came in January, 8% in February, 9% in March, and then when you add it up, it goes to 100. So then you see that 10% of the sales was in November and 10% in December. So it's much higher in those months. And I did the same thing again for store 2. So this was just to get an idea of like, is there how are the sales performing? And then I did it for the total as well, so the exact total. So when I did this, I noticed a trend. I noticed that in general, it looks like for January, tends to make up 8% of sales. Can you see?
Oh yeah.
Store 1 is 8%. And then in February as well, it tends to be 8% of sales in each store for the month of February. And this for March, generally 9 or 8. So for urban, March makes up 9%, whereas in rural, it makes up 8%. And then I noticed here, there's like, oh, what's happening here? The rural store here for this particular month is 7% instead of your 8, like the other rural. Because before rural 1 and rural 2 was the same. And then it picked up. So I've just highlighted in red. So this is the kind of thing where you'd want to investigate why has that dropped a little? Is that just nothing's happened, or did something happen in that particular month for rural 1? So that's like something I would highlight. So that's another thing I do. I tend to do percentages to get an idea of how the performance is, to get an idea of a pattern. And is there anything that has moved away from the pattern?
So, student please, the total percentage across the stores for each month, is it an average? I'm guessing that's an average.
Is it an average? Oh,
yes.
This one here, this total. Yes. So, yes. So it'll end up being an average, like a weighted average. So what I did, I added up the whole total, which is 153, and divided it by the total, the absolute total.
Oh yeah, okay, that makes sense.
So it's like a weighted average. So it kind of gives you like a rough feel. So it gives you an idea of a pattern. Is there anything deviating from the pattern? So it's like, do you see a hike or a drop in the usual pattern? So you can see why the very first thing we do is look at patterns and trends. And then afterwards, we look at, is it moving away from the pattern that we've been seeing? Okay. And then, so now I'm going to show you. So once I've done that, I've done the analysis, just to summarize. The 3 points that I looked at was identify trends, do some comparisons. So we were comparing against the stores and look for any deviations from our usual patterns. So once I've done that, and I'll be making notes, then I actually produced the actual reports. So do you have any questions before we go to the report?
Yes, because I was thinking if I could see the calculations you used, maybe it's in a different sheet, the formulas, I mean, are you able to come up with the averages and percentages?
Okay. So should we start off with the very first one, or do you mean the table?
Yeah, the table.
This one?
Yeah.
Okay. So this is the first one. Let me just make sure it's the very first one. Okay, so we know how we did the graphs. The graph is based on the data itself. If somebody's just joined us, welcome. I'm sorry, it seems that Meetup has a bit of an error, which is why I sent out an email. This session is recorded, so I'll share the link with you later at the end of the session. We're just doing analysis in terms of like the thinking process behind when I look for the narrative. Okay, so what I've done here, we use a line graph. I always use line graph to look at trends over time.
Yeah.
And then sometimes you might want to see percentages from the previous month. Okay, so looking at the data, the way you'd actually do this, let me go here. The way you do this, you've got the data here. So let's say you've got this urban storm one and you wanted to find out what the movement is, like what the percentage change is.
Okay.
So write down percentage change. Then you've got urban. Okay, so for January, it's just standard. We don't do that. For February, so we can see that it's increased, but by what percentage has it increased? There's a couple of ways you can do this. I tend to do it by, I look at the amount for February, I divide it by the previous month,
Okay.
and then I take away 1. And then I change that into percent.
Oh, so the -1, what was that for? What's the idea?
What the idea is that you can, because if you don't have -1, you don't have to have -1. If you don't have -1, this is what it looks like. It looks like 104%.
Oh, I see.
So that tells
Okay,
you,
okay,
yeah,
okay.
that is increased. Yeah. So some people will look at it and know straight away, oh, that means it's increased by 4%. Yeah. Whereas some people actually like to just see, just the
Okay.
number 4%.
Oh, I see.
Yeah. So I'll show you both ways, and I just recommend it down. So because then you get to see, for example, you see this one.
Oh,
So this is for
makes sense.
April. So you see how it's fallen down. So you've got 48% divided by 50. Sorry, 48,000 divided by 55,000. Take away 1. If we didn't have that take, you can see this is -13%. You can understand that clearly, right? Oh, it's
Yeah,
reduced
yeah.
by 13%. But if you didn't put
Yeah.
-1, it will tell you 87%. And that just means it's 87% less. When you have to
Oh,
start working out
yeah.
in your head. But yeah. That's why I did -1.
Oh, makes sense.
Yeah. Okay. There's like 2 or 3 different ways of getting that same calculation, but that's the way I like to do it. Okay, so that's the percentage change. So you can see what the sales, how the sales has increased or decreased from the previous month. And then we have another table. So now this is different. This is not percentage change over the previous month. This one is what percentage of sales are made up from each individual month. So for
Yeah.
example, you got urban stores for January, it's 2,000. And in that whole month, it made 630,000. What percentage of that came from January? That's when you do equal. So you did 50,000 divided by the total amount,
Yeah.
and then you got your answer 0.79365. And then I just change it into a percentage. I click on the percentage button up here, and then that gives us 8%.
Oh, okay. Okay. Oh, I see.
Yeah. So you have percentage change and then what proportion makes up a particular month. So that 2 different calculations. Okay. So now that I've done that, so now we've done the analysis. Like you said, if you remember, what we've noticed is that most of our sales are coming from urban, and there are peaks in December, November, December. We noticed that in one particular month it went down. What else did we notice? Yeah, one particular month it went down. So now we actually bring it all together. So we have our sales reports. So if you remember in the presentation, what I said, you always set the context. So always give your data a title that sets the context. Sales performance landscape reports. So that tells us we're looking at the landscape. You know, we want to understand what we want to understand. What is the sales performance? That's what that tells us when you hear the word landscape. What is the sales performance? And then the high level information is let's give the answer straight away. Is 1.9 million. So I would write it down straight away what the sales performance is. Do we all know how to do this in terms of just looking at the calculating totals?
Okay, so the formula, I don't quite understand the formula, but I should be able to do that in Excel. Like if I use the normal sum function.
Yes, exactly. That's what it is. It's a sum function. That's literally what I did. I basically just put, I basically just did equal, and I went to the actual data itself. But I said equal sum, open bracket, went to the data itself, and I wanted it to sum up all these numbers. Close brackets, enter, and it gives me the total.
Oh yeah.
That's what I did. Yeah, it looks more fancy than it actually is. So it's just the way you'd normally do the sum. Yes, I just put equal sum and I just put it in a white box for the title. And it just makes it more fancy. Okay, so that's the total annual sales. And then I did the average urban sales. So people like to know averages. So the average is in the exact same way. I wrote equal average and then I highlight the data for rural. So it's giving us what the average is. I decided to do the average of both of them because they act similar. And then the same thing for average suburb sales. So do you remember the purpose of this report that we want to do is we want to tell the sales team how they're performing. That's the purpose of this, like how it's been performing over the past year. And as you know, with sales team tend to focus on increasing sales, right?
Yeah.
So when we're doing this, our focus is on, okay, let's make sure we give them the information they need in terms of they know how they're performing, and let's tell them opportunities of how they can improve their performance. That's what we have in our head, and that will help us to decide what to show them. So now the first thing I did, I created a graph which just kind of explained the store, so they can see straight away the differences in performance in each store. And then I put down the number at the top. If you notice, this graph is clean. I didn't put too much information. I didn't like have so many grid lines.
Yeah.
It's just very, very clean. Yeah, because if you're doing it to sales team, they don't need to know too much, but they want numbers. And then the title, I put the title, there's two ways of doing titles. Your title can be a comment, like commentary. So that's what I've done. So instead of saying total annual sales by store, what I wrote down here was urban stores are dominating sales. So I'm giving them information straight away. I'm telling a story. So just from that graph alone, they're like, oh, so the urban stores are, have the highest sales. And then underneath in small writing, I've said what the graph is, in case it's not obvious. Annual total sales by store. So they can see straight away now. They know what it is just by reading the title. They know what it's about. They don't even need to look at the graph. Just the title alone tells them urban stores are doing it. And then if they want more information, they can see it. Okay. Now this one, normally I wouldn't include the numbers. This is up to you. You decide whether you want to include numbers. You gauge it by your audience, which is why I think it's important to know your audience. Okay, highest sales during November and December. Okay, and then underneath I said monthly sales by store. So if you see, I'm giving information, I'm telling them that we tend to get more sales in the month of November and December. You see, so once again, I'm using a title that is a commentary that gives information to them straight away. And I've kept it relatively clean, so you can see it by month. So you could argue that maybe these numbers are too busy, that we should delete it. Or you could look at it as, let's keep it, because the sales team, there might be like a sales team for urban store, there might be a separate sales team for rural store. If that's the case, then they probably both would want to see their numbers. That's why I've included in that. I've included it in there. So this is all about knowing your customer. Okay, and then once again, this one says sales peaks are higher in urban stores compared to rural stores. Once again, you see, I'm giving information. I'm telling them that we tend to have like a higher peak. It tends to go up much higher for urban stores than it does for the rural stores. You see, like it doesn't, from October to November, it doesn't go up by that much. Whereas if you look at urban, it's much more steeper. So I'm highlighting that for them. So it could be maybe there's something that the urban stores are doing that the rural stores are not doing. So they see that information. So this is all part of telling a story. I'm using my graph titles to tell them a story of like what is going on. And then I put like a little notice in here to say, notice, there's a sudden drop in rural store one sales in the month of April. Do you remember we saw that where the pattern changed? Because normally when you look at the pattern, like let's look at urban stores, for example, they tend to follow the same pattern. They go up and they go down, they go up and they go down, relatively at the same time, right?
Yeah.
But whereas when you look at rural store, something happened here where in April, that rural
Oh,
store,
like the two
one,
stores made almost the same sale.
yes, it's like it came, for some reason, it came down much more. It was much more steeper in rural store one compared to rural store two. Because normally
Oh
there's a
yeah,
bigger gap
true.
between the two. So it's like, and it also kind of happened here as well. So that could kind of make you ask the question, what is going on? Like, why is that? So that's just like a little highlight. So this is where the sales team would investigate that, or they might say, oh, that's nothing. But at least you've brought it to the attention.
And this
And
notice comments you made, is it
yeah,
with shapes or is this just a comment,
so
a
what I did, I
text?
went to insert, let me make this. I went to insert, and can you see it says text up here in the ribbon menu? I
Yeah,
clicked on
yeah.
the arrow and I clicked on text box.
Oh
And
yeah,
then
okay.
there's a text box.
Oh
And I'll
yeah,
just
okay,
try
that
it.
makes sense. Thank you.
There's many different ways of doing it. Then I did another text box again for actions and insights. So this is now where I put everything together. So because now when you look at everything that we're saying this is our annual sales. We have higher sales in urban than in the suburb, and you can see that. It's seasonal. They can see that we've told them. The peaks are higher in urban compared to rural. We've told them that rural store one dropped for some reason in April. And then we now give some insights. Okay, we say like marketing efforts, we can say increase marketing activity leading up to and during the holidays to capitalize on peak sale periods. So what we're saying is maybe they should increase their marketing efforts, whatever they're doing on marketing, they should increase in it because it looks like we tend to get peak sales, so maybe we can get even higher this month.
Yeah.
So say that they should focus more on those particular months. And in store performance, we can then say we should investigate the reason why there's a drop in sales in April for rural stores and take corrective action to prevent future occurrence. So that this is us giving advice. Can they investigate why that has dropped? And then we can also say, also, maybe we need to be doing something. We need to have some sales strategy in the rural stores to boost the sales because there's such a big difference between rural compared to urban. So that's us like giving insights. So you can see that in this graph, it's not just like just graph. It's actually you write some commentary in there to kind of guide them, and then you give your action or your insights at the very end.
Yeah, okay. This makes sense.
Yeah.
This makes sense.
Yeah.
Also, could you please explain how you're able to plot this? Just if you can scroll up a bit, please.
Okay.
Up a bit more. The first graph.
The first one.
Yeah. So
This
this,
one.
how are we able to make this design? I mean the borders
Okay.
around
borders.
the bar charts
I
and the
cheated.
statement.
The borders around the bar chart around. Okay, yeah, I cheated. I did. When I say cheated, I did. What do you call it? There's something in there. So basically, to do that kind of graph, highlight it.
Yeah.
You go to insert. Where is it? So this is your 2D chart. Oh no, this is not there. Sorry.
No, that is not. Okay.
It's good. Where is it coming from? This one? Okay, I'm gonna do it for you right now.
Okay.
Which one? The, if we get the whole total. Insert. Can you see? So,
Oh, okay. Yeah.
and then what you do, when you look, you go to chart design menu and you have all these different options. So when I say achieved, this is what I mean when I say achieved. I just took a ready-made
Oh,
design.
okay. Oh, this is good.
Yeah, it's good, isn't it? It could save you so much time. If you want to do
Yeah.
it yourself, you can. Like, for example, you might decide, actually, I don't want a chart title. So you can go in here and where is it? Chart title. You can then go here to remove. Yeah. So if you find
Okay.
that there's stuff there that you want to remove, you go to add chart elements. You can remove stuff and add things. And then the quick layout is actually, you have like ready-made layouts where it will tell you, it will add like a title or a legend and things like this. But to be
Oh, this
super,
is
super
good.
quick, you just go to these chart styles. You can just, even just hovering your mouse on it. As you hover your mouse, you see the chart will change. You notice?
Yeah. Yeah. I noticed. True.
So, yeah, so that's how I created that
Got
chart.
that. Oh, okay. That's right. And also, do you get to do you tend to hide your calculations sheets or you delete them and just paste it as image?
I tend to have two different spreadsheets.
Okay.
Yeah, it depends on who it is. Like if it's like within the team,
Yeah.
then I'll like hide it. And then they'll be able
Okay.
to unhide it themselves. But if I'm presenting,
Yeah.
most of the time you don't really keep this, you just present. So, like you show it on this big screen and you talk them through. So I won't really show the numbers. But then some people are
Okay.
like, oh, go deeper. Then I'll go into my working out. So for example, let's say, where I said like, oh, it peaks higher.
Yeah.
But some people say, like, oh, really? But you can't see that properly. Then I'll go into here and I'll show, this is the graph that actually shows that for urban soil one, we can see that, increased by 4%, 6%. I'll go through the actual numbers itself in the actual detail. Like
Yeah.
if
Okay,
they
that
want to,
makes sense.
otherwise I'll focus the efforts. Otherwise I'll stay on this sheet.
Oh,
Yeah,
fair enough.
because your workings are important, but then you decide what to show and what not to show based on the objective. Yeah,
Okay.
so you can see I always have a title, always show very high level at the top. If your data is in categories, show that category, how the performance are in each category. And then I always advise show things over time.
Yeah. Okay.
Line graphs are very good for showing things over time. So with this line graph, it's doing two things. We're able to see things over time and we're able to compare them. And then you say your insights, what you've noticed. There was something else that I wanted to mention. And then your charts, if you can put a commentary, say what it is that you want them to know so that they're not having to guess.
Okay. Okay.
And then underneath, you can do the actual, the title where actually the graph is, which is annual total sales by store. But the comment is at the top in big writing. You notice there's a difference in size. It's like the title that I've used is double the size of the little subtitle. Okay, and then in the actual chart, at the very, very end, I've just kind of given some context just to say, this is just a guide. It's just a guide, okay? So it's not always true, but it's true a lot of the times. Like line graphs are best for showing trends over time. That's what I tend to use. Tend to use a bar chart for comparing quantities across different categories. Pie charts are good if you want to see how parts show as a whole.
Yeah.
Scatter plots are good. You want to see the relationship between two variables. And then heat maps, I don't tend to use that often, but that shows the density. And then I can keep it simple. So you notice that I get the graph that I showed, it didn't have too many numbers in there.
Yeah. It didn't.
It didn't have the axis numbers in there. And then in terms of the key messages that I wanted to display, I made sure I put that in the title itself. Do you have any questions, or is there anything that surprised you?
No, it's been good so far. Apparently, with the way you've outlined your presentation and walked us through the whole process, you've got lots of experience in this field, and that makes sense. I'm not very much into Excel. I am just beginning to use it because I've come to understand that even though businesses are migrating to the use of Power BI and other BI tools, Excel is still one very key platform or tool they use also for their day-to-day analysis. So, but thank you very much.
So you don't need to go advanced in Excel. Just having like a intermediate level is enough. But but what I've tried to do is, even though I've done it in Excel, the focus is more on that you'll be able to be comfortable to apply it to any tool that you use, whether it be Power BI, Tableau. It's just the basic of having a high level information at the very, very top. And then you go into the analysis and the way you label your titles. These are things that you can use in any other tool, not just Excel. Okay, well, thank you. So what I'll do later, I will send you the spreadsheets and PowerPoint so you can have that. So,
okay, thank you. And also, if you wouldn't mind sharing the slides too, but anyways, it could be personal, but yeah, I'd appreciate that.
I have a question. Yes, Bukola?
No question. I just say this thorough presentation. I enjoyed it from the beginning to the end. Thank you for sharing.
Thank you. So what I'll do, I think I have all your email addresses. Actually, just to be on the safe side, please just email, if you don't mind, put it in the chat so I can make sure that I email you the YouTube link, the PowerPoint presentation, the Excel spreadsheet, everything. Brilliant. And I'll do this session again. Could not get. So if you want, you can join again.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.